My name is Mark Chalmers, and I'm President and CEO of Energy Fuels. Energy Fuels is a U.S.-based company that is focused on critical elements, primarily uranium, vanadium, and rare earths. So basically, the elements we're interested in and we're processing currently all drive reduction of carbon emissions and improve electrification. So it's always a pleasure to be here with my good friend, Matt.
Hey, how are you, man? It's good to see you here.
Good to see you.
Yeah, welcome to London. You've been here for a few days now, right?
Yes.
At the WNA, World Nuclear Association conference. What's everyone talking about? What's the mood?
It's interesting. It's been a few years since we've all gotten together.
2019.
Yeah, and you know, it's very dynamic right now. I mean, I think the key thing is I see a certain element of fear in people's eyes because you know they're looking at this need to increase nuclear, to reduce carbon emissions, but then you have these geopolitical tensions, particularly with Russia and Ukraine, and even moving to China, that people are asking questions. You know, how does it all happen? Where does the fuel come from? How do you convert it? How do you enrich it? How do you build these reactors quicker, faster? So, yeah, it's different than any meeting I've been to in the past with the WNA, and but yeah, it's very interesting.
It's kind of because I was last year in 2019, like you. COVID kind of got in the way a bit, but the mood was very different then. So I mentioned you used the word fear. I've heard the word bombastic, joyful, hopeful. You know, all of these are very positive
things.
It's
optimistic. It's optimistic.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, there's optimism, but I think when I hear fear, I think the fear is more like, you've got to have all these steps in the nuclear fuel cycle to have a successful nuclear fuel cycle. Yeah. And right now there's some gaping holes. And the biggest gaping hole is, you know, the dependence that's been created on Russia over the last couple decades. So that's a hole that people haven't figured out how you backfill that yet. Yeah. And so yeah, no, I think overall it's optimistic, very optimistic. That you know, we're in this new cycle focused on reducing carbon emissions. I think carbon emissions, if you go back 10 years or 20 years, you know, right now it's front and center, and everyone all around the world, you know, you're getting bipartisan support on reducing carbon emissions, and so we got to get there.
The narrative's definitely on board. The politicians are on board. In fact, the politicians have been given permission, because of increasing energy prices across the world, to really get stuck into this. They're not talking about it anymore. I want to focus on, like, we're not here to talk about conversion or enrichment or building SMRs or, you know, reactor extensions, because it's not what we do. We're down at the mining end. I want to talk about the mining end because we've got an investor audience here intrigued, right? Lots of chat over the last 3-4 years from lots of companies about what they can do. And that's when you said the word fear, I was thinking, right, yeah. You got to stop talking now. We've got to start doing, right?
Yeah, and look, I think when you look at the uranium companies that have been around, have survived, you know, over the last 10 years, yeah, it's time to start doing things. And we're excited about doing things. We've hired probably 25 people in the last 2 months. And we're starting to ready our mines. We're going to go back into production. I think, you know, we signed some contracts. We signed 3 contracts with 2 significant U.S. utilities, and we have deliveries starting next year. So yeah, we're going back into production, and we're not fearful going into production because we know how to produce uranium. So yeah, it's an exciting time. We also submitted a proposal to sell uranium to the DOE because this purchasing of uranium that kind of came out of that Section 232. Now, it was sort of at the moment, it's consolation prize because they're looking at buying 1 million pounds of uranium, of already produced uranium. And so we submitted a proposal in that regard. So we should hear probably within the next month.
We heard the U.S. government was represented yesterday by a young lady who made the right noises. We hear.
Oh, with the DOE, yeah. With Katie, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Katie's got a lot of enthusiasm, and I think that certainly the mood has changed. You know, people are talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, and you're starting to see the government moving on a number of these fronts to reestablish our abilities on all things critical, everything, right? And so yeah, but it takes time. I think what people don't understand is we've been globalizing for 20, 25 years. And to deglobalize isn't going to happen in a year or 2 or 3. It's going to take at least a decade to get really some momentum here. So, but yeah, on the uranium front, we're going to start up projects. We'll do it in a stepwise basis. The contracts that we've signed will probably allow us to start up a project next year. And hopefully we sell some uranium to the DOE.
Okay, so 3 contracts signed to date. A few utilities in attendance past few days from Europe, from US. Are they in listening mode or are they in talking mode? I mean, what's going on?
The dialogue's changed.
Right.
The utilities that we've done business with, which is confidential, it's a really it's a really solid relationship. And I think the key message that we've been sharing with the utilities and vice versa is we got to work together to kind of improve the circumstances that we're in. It's not about pointing fingers or saying, any of us would have known this would have happened. But I think there is a level of cooperation because people understand that you got to work together to get a better outcome.
Right. But like any buyer, you want the best deal. You want the best price. You want the best margins. Are they still in that mode, or is there a realization that coming down the line that we're going to run out of this stuff? The supply-demand gap is widening, it seems. I've heard some great stats over the past few days about the addition of SMRs to the, I don't use the word armory, but in terms of the portfolio available to utilities, could potentially double or more the demand for uranium going forward.
Yeah. Well, I think that they're not panicking right now. They do want competitive pricing, but I think they're coming to the realization that the uranium isn't going to be $20, $30 a pound anymore. So I think they're realizing the costs are going up on uranium, and you'll have to pay what you have to pay. But right now, when you look at all the inflation the last year or two, and you look at what we used to say was sort of an incentive price of $50, $55 a pound, most people are talking at 70-something a pound now.
Right.
And I think that kind of shocks people that we're moving that quickly. Now, that doesn't mean that people are going to make more money because of inflation. I mean, reagents, people, parts, supplies to operate any kind of business is becoming very difficult.
Well, reagents, sulfur, the lot,
yeah,
right?
Sulfuric acid, and oxidants, and it's and people.
Yeah, well, that's the big topic, because in a industry which is, as I say, it's been globalization all the way, and now it's like, we need to be independent. We need to be able to deliver energy security to our own country, either independently or with friends, right? You've got a scenario, it seems, that the US has got to work out who its friends are and who it can depend on, because it's not going to be able to deliver it domestically. Europe's trying to do the same thing. This globalization component just hasn't gone away from this entire story. I mean, are you hearing anything from the stage, yesterday or the day before or this morning, which leads you to believe that you understand what those allegiances can look like? Because if I'm looking at conversion or enrichment, that's a problem that's not going to be solved anytime soon.
Yeah. What I'm picking up from people at the conference is, there's all these steps, and none of them can be fixed quickly. But there is this mood of we're working together. There is a mood, we're in a pickle. And that, I think, is one of the, again, differentiators if you go back 5 years ago or 10 years ago. 5 years ago, people would say, we can buy uranium anywhere. Yeah. We can get it from anywhere. And I had one utility tell me about 4 or 5 years ago is we won't pay 1 penny more for U.S. uranium than Russian uranium or Kazakh uranium. Right. Not 1 penny more. That attitude's changed. For the right reasons. Yeah. So and I think too the fact that when you look at all these focus on decarbonization, electrification, you've got this ESG focus, and the ESG focus is, where are you getting your materials? Are you responsibly sourcing your materials? And it's going to be very hard for a number of utilities to answer that question to their shareholders with the changes that have occurred recently. So again, our approach as Energy Fuels is to work to get a better outcome for the people that are customers, which are nuclear utilities.
What's the smartest thing you've heard on that stage of the past few days that you think utilities need to pay attention to, or quite frankly, investors need to understand?
I think that the biggest question is, we have to deglobalize, and it's not going to happen quickly. Right. And when I did an interview on CNBC the other day, and if you start looking at how you start shifting the dynamics on the supply and these products and everything, it's going to take a decade to even make a dent, a small dent, in those dynamics. So yeah, I think the reality is we're in this pickle. We've got to get ourselves out. Nothing's going to be fast. It's going to take time. It's going to take money, and it's going to take government support. When you look at the nuclear fuel cycle around the world, no successful program has been able to succeed without government support. If you look at the Chinese program, you look at the Russian program, they've had support and they continue on. But then you look at the UK, you look at France, you look at the US, you look at China, and all these countries tried to pull back, right? And what happened to their fuel cycles? They start dropping off. You can't pull back. You have to stay there. And so I think what I'm hearing, another thing I'm hearing is that we're going to have to go back into that period of time where government support is looking out, again, decades, not looking out for 1 year or one bill.
Oh, man. Good luck with that, Mark. It's weird. Politicians today make investments in cycles. I'm in power, or I've got a job for this long. I'll make decisions based on that. It needs to. You were saying it during Section 232. You were saying, you weren't calling it globalization, but you were calling it something else. But it meant that the US is not taking care of the US here. I know you don't want to do "I told you I was right" kind of conversation, but it's exactly what you thought or could happen has happened with obviously the Russia-Ukraine situation. Here in Europe, we're very acutely aware of the knee-jerk reaction from European politicians, which have created a huge knock-on effect for our energy prices here. And we're talking about I think yesterday was a price cap was implemented here in the UK, which is going to be paid for by us, ironically, the taxpayers. So the people that are going to benefit from this will have to pay for this, but we'll amortize it over 100 years. There you go. So it's like it's a bad outcome from a bad decision, from a bad situation. Sorry to rant, but I do think the politicians have got to take a lot of blame for what has been created over the last 20, 30 years. Yeah. And their reaction to obviously recent events as well.
Well, and I think I've said this to you before, the world got addicted to cheap, and they didn't care where it came from. Yeah. And that whole concept of globalization was feeding, cheap, right? Mm. Go to where you can get it the cheapest. And a lot of people subscribed to it. A lot of consumers, people went down the aisle in a store and they saw something that, was cheaper because it came from China or wherever it came from, and they buy it. So, look, I think, and again, we don't want to say told us so, but the 232, and I think it did a lot of good for planting the seeds that are currently in the government and in DC, because we started messaging to the government and to people in DC the dependency that we had on Russia and Kazakhstan about 5 years ago, and some of those people are still in government, and I think it wasn't a waste. It was not a wasted time. But yeah, I don't want to say told you so. It actually it's turned out worse than we ever thought. We weren't hoping for this type of these kind of issues at these scales in any way. But if we had put some of those trade barriers in place 4 or 5 years ago, we'd be in a lot better shape than we are today.
What's the best conversation you've had at the WNA this year?
I think the best conversation I've had has been with the uranium producers. A lot of people I haven't seen for a number of years, and I think that it's kind of entertaining to listen to some of the colorful characters, because they're colorful. About who's going to produce, what they're going to produce, and how this is going to evolve. There is quite a bit of discussion about there's a number of producers that don't want to produce because they don't want the world to know what they can actually produce or not produce. So yeah, I think that's kind of, interesting, but that's not new. I mean, you can go back to 2006 and 2007 and you'd have that same kind of discussion. But it's been really great to catch up with a lot of colleagues that I've worked with around the world that I haven't seen for a few years. And everybody has a few more gray hairs, but what's amazing to me is they still show up.
No, I think it's great. I agree with you. I would say I would love to speak to everyone here the way that a utility views them, because I think no one quite knows how a utility thinks about these things. I'd love to understand that, because there are developers talking about developing projects who will produce. There are others who will try their darndest, but they're going to need a lot higher price to produce. And there are others who just won't, because they can't. And I've spoken to a couple of utilities over the past couple of days. That's their view of life. I wish I would understand how precisely they break it down, but that's their view of life, which is problematic, because there's not as many pounds able to come into production within the time frame that is being suggested. If you add up all of the numbers from all of the companies at the moment, it says that the supply side is not as healthy as we'd hoped, whereas we know the demand side is growing. Isn't that a problem coming down the line?
Well, that's what it looks like as a problem. So, I don't know how it all comes out at the end of the day, but I think there is a pinch point coming. I think that, when we talked about like inflation, it's real, it's live now. I don't know how it continues on over the next few years. Projects that require large capital expenditure, if they haven't refreshed those in the last 2 or 3 years, if they refresh those numbers, I think it's going to shock people. I think it's shocking some people. I mean, in our case, we have most of our capital's been expended, and that's a real advantage, because you can start up quicker, faster. You don't have that capital load. Interest rates are higher. So there's a lot of these things are moving. I don't think this year, I've been in the uranium business for 46 years, and I don't think I've seen this many moving parts any time in my whole career as I do right now.
It is, but against a slightly different backdrop as well. That's the other exciting thing here. It's nuclear as baseload energy, with a clean, green, cheap, and hopefully is viewed by more and more people as such. Do you think it's here to stay, or would it take one small misstep somewhere in the world for that not to be the case?
Well, if it isn't here to stay, how are we going to get there? How is the world going to electrify? How are you going to have all these electric vehicles if nuclear was to, go off of the agenda? I think when I reflect back to say 2006, 2007, people weren't talking about the coal business going to nothing. And now they are.
I think that's unrealistic, but they are talking about it.
No, and it is unrealistic. But like in the United States, I think coal production has gone down it's a third of what it was.
Right.
Okay. That's a lot in 10-year drop.
But not because it's not needed, but because it's not getting the funding from the funds who are gone ESG crazy. Right.
Look, it's a lot of different things. So, I mean, I think that if the world is committed to electrification and reducing carbon emissions, how do you add up the math to come out with a successful outcome if you take nuclear out of the picture? And I just don't see how you can do it. And I think that's the realization. When you see a number of these, environmental groups, politicians that historically have not been in favor of nuclear power, I think they're seeing the math and they realize they have to have it.
Yeah.
And, look at Japan, look at South Korea, look at all these changes. And in California, extending Diablo Canyon. That California is pretty much the left, and to extend Diablo Canyon tells you a lot. Yeah. But they're also looking at, brownouts, blackouts, and winter's coming.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how people change their mind when stuff gets expensive. Okay, they all of a sudden the moral code slightly changes in their terms, right? In their terms, I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with nuclear. It's the biggest part of the solution needed going forward. But when you kind of got these anti-fossil fuel marches happening, and you've got anti-coal rhetoric going on in the funding side of things, because companies don't want to be seen as funding dirty energy. The truth is, we need all of the above, but nuclear's got it's the big kind of cornerstone, the building block on which everything should be built. It would seem to us.
Again, to make the math work, you've got to look at what you have and where you're trying to go. Yesterday, I was doing some marketing, and I did, I think, 4 meetings in the afternoon yesterday. And I think of the 4 meetings, 3 of the meetings were to clean energy transition funds.
Wow. They didn't exist 4 years ago.
They didn't exist 4 years ago. Clean energy funds.
Right.
And most of them kind of originated out of like the oil and gas business, and then they're taking those steps. They're transitioning over, but that's what the funds are called, these different funds. But people try to simplify complex things. And I think when people say, no coal, no oil, no gas, you be careful you don't move too quickly. I think that's what Germany's kind of been experiencing. They try to move too quickly, and then you find out that the spreadsheet didn't work. And if the spreadsheet doesn't work, you've got a problem.
You got a problem, but I think some sanity is returning to the space. Certainly, it was good news for nuclear, which is the fact that if you look at the energy return on capital invested, it's numero uno by some distance, but clearly these are infrastructure required in different parts of the world, will take different lengths of time. But I'm celebrating at the moment, change of narrative. Politicians are on board. I think the public seems to be getting on board, and the pressure groups seem to be talking a lot less, because they're going to get not a lot of listening, because people are under pressure at home, the cost of energy. Industries are under pressure and shutting down in Germany, so it's loss of jobs. That's not good. It's a real serious situation, and I'm just intrigued as to the mood of the nation downstairs has been against the backdrop of nuclear is the solution. We're not pushing, against a closed door. It seems to be very, very wide open at the moment.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it's a lot of optimism downstairs at the conference. But there's caution too. There's a caution sign, and we'll see how it unfolds. But look, Energy Fuels is driving its bus.
Yeah.
We're driving it because we can, and that's something we can control. We are moving forward. As I said, we'll be planning to open at least 1 mine. The rare earths is making the leaps and bounds, and I know this is
give us some of that. I know this is an energy conference, and we should be talking about uranium, but rare earths has been the thing that's going to set the world alight for you this year.
In the last, I hope in the 4th quarter I can roll out our vision and our plans in more detail, because a lot of investors have been saying, so where are you going, and are you going uranium, you're going rare earths? And I say, we're going both, and we're going to go both. But I'm excited to have that opportunity when it comes fairly soon, hopefully, to roll out what that vision is. And I think it will be very positive for people that are invested in our company for the reason we're in business, which is focus on critical elements in reducing carbon emissions, electrification. So,
Mark, good man. Good to see you, buddy.
Good to see
Appreciate you coming and making the time to see us. Always good to hear what you're up to. It's definitely heading the right way on uranium, but the rare earth thing, I'm super excited about.
The combo there, it is extraordinary for us. And I think I've always said it, if you want to invest in a uranium-only company, you invest in uranium-only company. You want to invest in rare earth only, but with Energy Fuels, you get an investment in both.